Japanese invasion of China 1937, the Battle of Shanghai 1937, Sino-Japanese War, prelude to the Inferno, how a bridge, a blunder, and a bullet lit the flames of Shanghai. What do you get when an empire on the rise stabs at a wounded republic and the rest of the world looks away? In 1937, a city known as the Paris of the East lit up not with lights, but with artillery fire, air raids, and screams. The Battle of Shanghai wasn't just a military clash. It was Chiang Kai-shek's desperate gamble, General Matsui Iwane's ruthless ambition, and Japan's attempt to dominate China before the world woke up. But why did a modern city become the graveyard of thousands? What made Japan arrest its own peace negotiators and choose escalation over compromise? And how did Shanghai's fall pave the road to Nanjing, where war turned into an unspeakable massacre? This is a story of extremes, from diplomatic hope to street-by-street warfare. It's a tale of a patchwork Chinese resistance, of Black Saturday's horrific blunder, and of a capital city turned into a devil's playground. We follow the railways of conquest, the chants of nationalism, and the rise of slogans like "China cannot be lost." We meet a poet general whose troops carried bayonets and entitlement, and a headmistress counting the victims with trembling hands. Each moment raises the stakes. Why did the international powers stand by? What happens when ideology outgrows humanity? And how did this battle shape the outlines of World War II in Asia, years before Pearl Harbor? Subscribe and turn on notifications now, because this journey, through betrayal, brutality, and defiance, will shape your understanding of how history ignites. It's July 1937, and the air near Beijing is thick with tension and mosquitoes. Japanese troops, stationed in China under the dusty pretext of the Boxer Protocol, decide to stretch their legs with a little nighttime military exercise near the Marco Polo Bridge, known locally as Luguqiao, and to history as the place where peace went to die. They forget to tell the Chinese. Oops. A Japanese soldier goes missing. The Chinese refuse to let Japanese troops search their town. The soldier returns, probably from a bathroom break or a romantic misadventure, but it's too late. Colonel Renya Mutaguchi, a man whose diplomacy skills ranked somewhere between a sledgehammer and a chainsaw, orders artillery fire on Chinese positions. China refuses to back down. Japan calls it the China Incident. Historians call it the start of the Second Sino-Japanese War. And the world? The world barely notices, yet. Chiang Kai-shek, the nationalist leader, had technically unified China in 1928, but technically is doing a lot of heavy lifting here. His party was ideologically fractured, and regional warlords still ran provinces like personal fiefdoms. His military was underfunded, undertrained, and underwhelming. Advisor Xu Yongchang warned, if one can stomach it, it would be best to make the utmost effort to stomach Japan. Translation: we're not ready for this. But Chiang had a change of heart. He'd spent years fighting Chinese communists, but now saw Japan as the greater existential threat. This time, unlike in 1931, China would resist and hope the world noticed. General Matsui Iwane was no ordinary warmonger. Born in Nagoya in 1878, the sixth son of a samurai family, he was sickly, scholarly, and obsessed with Chinese culture. He read Chinese poetry, spoke fluent Mandarin, and once helped a young Chiang Kai-shek find housing in Japan. But don't let the bookish charm fool you. Matsui believed China needed a benevolent Japanese correction. He saw Japan as Asia's savior and China as a puppet of Western imperialism. He urged an all-out attack, declaring, "Make the Chinese abandon the policy of depending on Europe and America. Make them recognize Japanese troops as their real friends." War Minister Sugiyama Hajime told Emperor Hirohito it would be over in 1 month. Spoiler, it wasn't. The Japanese government, in a rare moment of civility, sent negotiators to Nanjing to talk peace. But the military, who apparently skipped the memo, arrested them before they arrived. Why? Because in 1937, Tokyo's civilian government didn't fully control its own army and navy. The generals were playing their own game, and diplomacy was just a pawn they didn't mind sacrificing. So instead of peace, Tokyo sent a threat to Chiang Kai-shek. If China dared to resist, his government would be the target. And they weren't bluffing. Japan had 950,000 troops, with 600,000 deployed to China in 1937. They had a modern navy, a formidable air force, tanks, artillery, and soldiers trained like clockwork assassins. China? Well, it had 1.8 million troops, but only 300,000 were loyal to Chiang and properly trained. The rest were warlord armies, regional militias, and communist forces under Mao Zedong, who had just agreed to a truce with Chiang after years of civil war. It was like trying to conduct a symphony with half the orchestra playing jazz. Weapons? A chaotic mix of German Mausers, Soviet Mosins, and whatever else could be scavenged. Germany wanted Chinese resources and hoped to pull both China and Japan into the Anti-Comintern Pact. Chiang, ever the diplomat, kept ties with Berlin and Moscow, balancing on a geopolitical tightrope. The Soviets, fearing a two-front threat from Germany and Japan, sent 450 pilots and ground crew and equipped 20 Chinese divisions in 1937 alone. Still, analysts estimated that one Japanese division had 3 to 12 times the combat power of a Chinese one. On July 27th, Japan launched a full offensive in northern China, following the railways like breadcrumbs. They swept through Chahar Province, Zhengzhou, and Nanjing, brushing aside poorly organized resistance. Beijing fell on July 28th. At Pingxingguan, however, Chinese nationalists held firm while communist units under Lin Biao attacked the Japanese rear, a rare moment of unity and success. But it was fleeting. General Hisashi Terauchi, ignoring Tokyo's orders to halt, pushed forward like a man possessed. By December, Japan had captured the capitals of Jili, Hebei, Shanxi, Zhejiang, and Shandong. Chiang made a bold move: open a new front in Shanghai, China's economic jewel. The idea? Draw Japanese forces away from the north, protect Soviet supply lines, and drag the war into an urban meat grinder where defense had a chance. It was also a political play. Western powers had garrisons in Shanghai, and Chiang hoped their proximity would force intervention. His wife, Song Meiling, made a heartfelt radio plea to the U.S. If the whole Occidental world is indifferent, we in China, who have labored for years under the stigma of cowards, will do our best. Chiang sent his best German-trained divisions to defend the city. Japan was ready. They had warships in the harbor, troops in the city, and itchy trigger fingers. On August 13th, skirmishes erupted. Japanese naval guns bombarded Chinese positions. Refugees flooded into the international settlement, hoping for safety. Then came Black Saturday. Chinese bombers tried to hit the Japanese cruiser Izuma. Instead, they accidentally bombed the international settlement, killing over 1,000 civilians, including foreigners. A reporter described the carnage. Flames from a blazing car played over distorted bodies. Hands, legs, arms lay far from smashed masses of flesh. A Chinese policeman lay dead in his tracks with shrapnel through his head. It was a PR disaster and a tragedy that shocked the world. On August 17th, China attacked the Japanese garrison but failed. Japan responded with fresh troops, house-to-house combat, and aerial terror campaigns. Cities were bombed, ports were blockaded, civilians died by the thousands. Emperor Hirohito asked how to de-escalate. The military said, more force. Moderates were sidelined. China issued a general war directive, the point of no return. The battle dragged on through September, October, and November. Japan used poison gas, launched an amphibious landing at Hangzhou Bay, and pushed into Shanghai's southern districts. Chinese troops fought desperately along rivers and creeks, but their counterattacks failed. Japan feared international intervention, so they launched frontal assaults, costly but effective. One Japanese soldier wrote, "We viewed China as a dog. It now emerges as a wolf." Chiang later admitted he should have retreated earlier. The road to Nanjing. When war became a nightmare, it began with a gamble. After the brutal Battle of Shanghai, where China lost up to 250,000 troops, including 70% of its best-trained officers, and Japan suffered 40,000 to 100,000 casualties, the war was supposed to be winding down. But instead, it was winding up, like a dragon coiling for a second strike. Despite the loss, China gained something priceless: unity. Warlords who once squabbled like cats in a sack now rallied behind Chiang Kai-shek. The public roared with slogans like, "China cannot be lost," and sang the March of the Volunteers, which would later become the national anthem. Even the USSR signed a non-aggression pact in August 1937, opening the door for Soviet military aid. But not everyone was optimistic. Nationalist Zhou Fohai wrote, "China will have no more history. Why should I keep my diary anymore?" Chiang, ever the disciplinarian, sacked generals he deemed cowardly. The war was now a war of resistance, and resistance would be tested in the ancient capital of Nanjing. Nanjing wasn't just a city, it was a dream in stone. Wide boulevards, stately buildings, and the mausoleum of Sun Yat-sen, the father of modern China. It had been the capital during the Nanjing decade, a time of reform and hope. Losing it would be like watching the future burn. Chiang moved his HQ to Wuhan and declared Chongqing the new capital. But Nanjing still mattered, strategically and emotionally. Chiang's advisors, including Alexander von Falkenhausen, a German military expert, warned him, "Don't fight in Nanjing." The city was surrounded on three sides by the Yangtze River, a trap waiting to snap shut. But Chiang was under pressure, from warlords, party members, and the ghosts of history. He needed to show China and the world that resistance wasn't just rhetoric. He declared, "We must defend Nanjing." In 1 month, the international situation may change dramatically. Spoiler, it didn't. Japanese General Matsui Iwane, a man who loved Chinese poetry but not Chinese sovereignty, led 200,000 troops toward Nanjing. His goal? Crush the remnants of Chiang's army and end the war in one glorious blow. Defending Nanjing were 75,000 Chinese troops under General Tang Shengji, but only 20,000 were well-trained. Some lacked footwear, others fled, and the German panzer tanks they had were already damaged and ill-suited for China's terrain. December 5th, Japan attacks. December 8th, outer defenses fall. December 10, inner ring collapses. December 12th, Japanese storm the city walls. Chiang had already left. General Tang fled the next day, ordering an unauthorized retreat. Soldiers and civilians mixed in chaos, many crushed at the river crossings. Westerners set up a safe zone in the international quarter. John Rabe, a German Nazi party member, hoped Hitler would help. He didn't. Meanwhile, the USS Panay, a U.S. Navy gunboat, was evacuating Americans. On December 12th, Japanese aircraft bombed and machine-gunned the Panay and nearby oil tankers. 4 people died, including 2 U.S. sailors. Japan apologized and paid $2 million, narrowly avoiding war with America. Japanese units, many of them battle-hardened and brutalized by the fighting in Shanghai, entered Nanjing with orders to crush resistance. But instead of military discipline, they unleashed mass killings, often in full view of foreign journalists and international residents. One soldier wrote in his diary, "I stabbed 30 of the damn chucks, climbed atop the mountain of corpses, stabbed again and again, old folks and kids, we killed them lock, stock, and barrel." This wasn't rogue behavior, it was systemic. Soldiers competed in killing contests, executed prisoners en masse, and used civilians for bayonet practice. The violence wasn't limited to the battlefield. Japanese troops raped civilians at will, mostly women, but also teenage boys. The headmistress of a girls' college in the safety zone estimated 1,000 rapes per night. Resident Cheng Rui-fang described the horror. Japanese soldiers were arriving in broad daylight to steal money and rape people bayoneted to death, even in the safety zone. Estimates vary, but historians believe there were 5,000 to 20,000 rapes and 100,000 to 300,000 murders. Several factors fueled this nightmare. Abandonment of the laws of war. In July 1937, Japan formally rejected international wartime conduct. Brutal training. Japanese soldiers were abused and dehumanized during training, making cruelty second nature. Ideology of superiority. Many believed the Chinese were racially inferior, unworthy of sovereignty. Staff Officer Ryukichi Tanaka summed it up chillingly, "You seem to think of them as human, I see them as pigs." By late 1937, the Second Sino-Japanese War had devastated China. Millions were refugees, and Japan controlled much of the north and east. But the Chinese refused to surrender. Germany, once a supplier of weapons to China, pivoted toward Japan. The Soviet Union stepped in, becoming China's main arms supplier. Britain and the U.S. began inching toward support. Historian Rana Mitter noted, "China was the first allied power to fight the Axis." New York Times. Despite battlefield victories, Japan was overextended, couldn't garrison all conquered territory, controlled only cities and railways, spent 90% of its national budget on war, gained little economic benefit from devastated regions. In January 1938, Japanese commanders met in Tokyo. Their decision? Escalate the war, not end it. Coming up next, the fall of Nanjing, massacre at the capital, Decca 1937. Nanking Defense Committee versus Gen Osaka Yasuhiko. What happens when a symbol of national pride becomes a silent witness to unimaginable horror? In December 1937, Nanjing was more than a city. It was the heartbeat of China's dreams for modernity. But in just 6 days, that heartbeat was drowned beneath fire, steel, and screams. As the Nanking Defense Committee tried desperately to hold the line, General Osaka Yasuhiko unleashed a storm of brutality that would scar history forever. Why did the defenders hold on when escape was all around them? How did a princely commander turn a campaign into a massacre? And what did the world see and choose not to stop? This isn't just a story about war. It's about the price of resistance, the cost of indifference, and the souls lost between victory and vengeance. Subscribe now and turn on notifications because you won't want to miss the next chapter in this haunting saga. We're diving deep into the final days of Nanjing, where courage battled cruelty and where history trembles still.